Thank you.
Would you please type questions in the chat? I'll collect them as we go along, and then we'll pause to answer them. And with that, go ahead and take it away.
So good morning. I think Karen has shared her screen. So you should be seeing a slideshow. And since we have all been introduced, we were going to do that, but we're not going to do that because we've been introduced. So quick agenda. We're going to do a brief exploration of the equity reports that you received earlier or in the fall semester. We're going to contextualize the equity data with national trends, and then we're going to explore some solutions to increase equity in our classrooms and across campus. Switch, please. So I'm going to let Amaya give us our rules of engagement.
Hi all, my name is Amaya and I'm an assistant professor in the biology department, as Denise introduced me. And I just wanted to let you know how things are going to go this morning, so you know what we have in mind. We've prepared about 90 minutes of an interactive exploration of these topics. I know it says until noon, and we're going to try to keep it a little bit, respectful of you guys' time. We are doing a lot of group reflections through breakout rooms. We want you to think about the topics that we are presenting. And so you will be doing those. And of course, we don't need to do this, CSU Pueblo stated, because we are all so polite, of course, but just to remind us that breakout rooms etiquette will be expected. We're going to make sure in your breakout room that every participant gets a turn to speak, and that we practice active, respectful listening when we're not speaking. And as Denise mentioned, we have the chat box, or you can raise your hands in the reactions tab for questions. So that's kind of how we have this in mind.
All right, so we're gonna, for a brief few minutes here, talk about the equity reports that we received, that we all received in the fall. So if you want to click. Where is it? There it is. So I'm assuming we've all received one of these, probably early mid-October. Just randomly showed up in your mailbox. This is an example from a random associate professor of chemistry, just random. So that's that. So before we leave, let's go back up for a second. So I know there are a lot of complaints about those, about how the data is how it's calculated, the low sample numbers and all that. So while you're on mute for the next 10 seconds, feel free to vent your frustrations, and then we're going to get those all out, and then we're going to come back and focus more on the trends associated with this than the specific numbers you're receiving. Okay, 10 seconds. Everybody yell, vent. Screen.
Squeeze your stress ball.
You got it. All right, 10 seconds is done. So that's, we're not, there's no more complaints about these. Okay, so here's the deal. If we click a couple here, one more, and then you got, and then you got your how to read those a day after, just in case you were confused. So
oh, I'm sorry, there's a delay. Okay.
There's some data there. There's some highlighted numbers, there's some metallic numbers, there's some colored numbers, and those are all just to show differences between either your average or what your data shows for one component compared to the other. So like male to female, first gen to non-first gen, whatever. Okay, so if we move, there were 5 kind of sections in the report. So click. Next. All right, so you got an overall report of all your data. You've got one that compared underrepresented minorities to white students. Next. Then you got one that compared male to female, and you got one next that compared, trying to remember the order, rural to non-rural, and you got one that compared PAL to non-PAL, first gen to non-first gen, and then PAL to non-PAL. All right, and these weren't just randomly selected. They were selected because there's national data on these different groups. All right, And while the numbers are important, they're not really what's the main focus, because no matter how you calculate these, you're going to get some sort of similar numbers. My numbers are similar to my colleagues in my department. Our department is similar to the rest of the departments in STEM, and so on and so on and so on. And it's not just CSU, it's not just Colorado, it's nationwide and international issues. Okay, so the trends are the same. The numbers may not be right, but we're still going to see the trends even no matter how we calculate it. So today we're going to address, now that we're aware of these issues and these discrepancies, we're going to address what's causing them and how we as faculty in an institution can try to overcome some of these boundaries or eliminate some of these boundaries or minimize some of these boundaries. Okay, so like I said, it's not just us, it's not just you, it's not just me, this is a national issue. Okay, and the equity reports, the way I took it was, hey, let's become aware of these issues and let's move forward to try to overcome some of these issues. Because honestly, I wasn't aware of all of it, and since I've been a faculty fellow, I've definitely become more aware of it. But honestly, those are probably not the only 5 groups. I can think of one, military, non-military, where there's probably also a gap. And I'm sure there's a lot more that just, that we don't always hear of. All right, next slide. All right, so we're gonna have a little video here that's just gonna give us a tale of 2 schools. That's going to just give us some talking points, to initiate some talking points. So while you're watching these, you should look at which of these students most matches your experience as you went through school, and which matches the students in our classrooms at CSU Pueblo. All right, go ahead, Karen.
Fingers crossed, it will actually load up and play.
If it doesn't, I can share
My name is Cedric Forte. I'm a junior at Heritage High School,
Hear the sound?
425.
My name is Jackson Langvort. I'm 18-year-old and I'm a senior at McLean High School. For academic subjects, I'm in Advanced Placement Literature,
English,
Advanced Placement U.S. Government,
Biology,
and Comparative Government,
Art,
Advanced Placement Music Theory,
Health,
Geosystems for Science,
and Algebra.
Men's Chorus,
What's it?
Leadership, and Technical Theater. So I drive and I get here half an hour before school starts every day, just for the fun of it. Trying to park here, if you come in at normal time, is really awful. You end up parking like half a mile away.
A lot of students who go to a school all the way across town have to catch 2 and 3 buses in the subway just to get to school. And I think that, if we have to travel that far just to get education, then we should be able to travel for free.
The kids here are motivated in just about everything. They're motivated to even learn, which is scary to hear for a high school kid. They're motivated to succeed in sports, extracurriculars, anything.
I think they've lost the will to learn. A lot of them. They just don't find school interesting no more because they don't have the power to do anything, and they say so in the classrooms.
This is our auditorium theater. We have lights, standard light sound. It's not particularly high tech, but we have a nice system.
Here, go to the metal detector. They use this to try to, keep school safe, but obviously it doesn't work because even when someone walks through and it beeps, they don't even search them or anything. They just say, okay, walk back through, empty your pockets. That's all they do.
This is our new studio. It's one of 3 high schools in the county who has it. Hey, orchestra, can you start playing? Okay. It's all kids. It's all run. It's all performed. It's all produced by kids.
Well, one thing with these walls, they really need to be repainted because of the graffiti. As you can see here, they tried to repaint it, but it doesn't blend in. You can actually tell they just really just gave up on repainting the walls. So every teacher in this school buys their own school supplies. And it's actually very sad because like the school system should have money to, you know, provide for those school supplies for students, but they don't. And the teachers have to come out of their paychecks just to, you know, be able to support their students.
That's our observatory. It's a giant dome with a telescope, and you can see the entire sky from there. If every school in the country can be like McLean, I think it's really going to increase standard of living, just going to make things a lot better.
Obviously, it's not fair. I mean, we have not even half of what they have. I mean, we're all students. Why shouldn't we receive the things that they have? I mean, we're all trying to learn. We all want to grow up to be something, so why shouldn't we receive the same advantages they have? I don't understand that.
All right. So you're gonna go to the next. Okay, so we're gonna take a couple minutes to reflect on the questions that you see on the right. And then we're going to go to breakout rooms and share some of those with probably 4 or up to 4 per breakout room, and share with that group. And then we'll come back and share a little bit with the whole group. So looking at what you do in a class, can we envision courses that will work for our students' various needs? So how can we tailor courses, or how can we change things in our courses to meet needs of all the students better than we are right now? And then instead of blaming students for attempting too much work, going to school full time, and whatever other things they've got going on, how might we better accommodate them? Right. And yeah, so take a couple minutes and reflect on those, and then we're going to go to breakout rooms and discuss those.
Denise, you are going to be putting us into breakout rooms, correct?
That's correct. Just please give me a moment to balance them out.
Absolutely.
Thank you,
Just
ma'am.
checking.
Yes, ma'am. I popped it in the chat too,
Ah,
but you can't see that because your screen's maximized because you're running the presentation. All right, everyone, the breakout rooms are open. Hi, Judy. Can you hear me?
Yeah, am I the only one here?
No, we started a breakout room activity, so I will pop you into the room, a room for collaboration.
Okay, I might have to.
Sorry, too late. Hi, everyone. I'll just give folks about 20 seconds to finish up and then I'll close the rooms. Good discussion, good ideas. Fantastic.
Denise,
Yes.
since you're kind of a breakout room kind of person, if you could tell us about how many in each group. We weren't sure. We had a little delayed start because we thought the groups were going to be bigger.
Oh, I see. Rick
Was it
asked, he mentioned he wanted up to 4 people. So that gave me the option to set it automatically with the range of 3 to 4.
My group had not heard that. So just a
Okay.
lesson learned is just before we go, maybe remind us how many people to look for so that we can not be waiting for Zoom.
Thanks for that, Kevin. No, that's a great suggestion. I will always take suggestions. Thank you. And there's about 20 seconds until the room closes automatically on everyone.
All right, as people come back in. Someone like Karen, if she's back yet. Yeah, she's back. Share your stuff again. So we're gonna share.
Do I need to share the screen again?
If you would.
Yeah, okay. I didn't know that not everybody could see it. Here we go. Let's try that
I
again.
see
Boop,
you.
boop. I make clicking noises as I go through my stuff. I got to click here. Here we go.
All right, so
that's where we were.
We're gonna briefly share out here. And this is going to be pretty brief. We can speak up or or throw stuff in the chat. I'll start real brief. We talked about a number of things, but different types of assessments. So, chemistry, we do traditionally, it's like, hey, 3 exams, final exam, some homework in there, providing a bit less high point assessments to accommodate more people. We discussed how we deal with students who are doing a lot of other things, especially non-traditional students. How, I used to be, hey, you got to get your priorities straight. Work or school should be your priority, and have definitely way backed off on that and trying to help students who are non-traditional, who have other things going on. And the main thing I did, I sat down and did the math. Like, if you're a 32-year-old and trying to get a degree, I don't want you to be 40 before you get it in your profession. I want you to get into your profession as soon as we can get you into it. So, yeah, so feel free to throw things in chat or speak up right now because we got a couple minutes. Please share.
Changing the timeline of when things are due, allowing more flexibility in that. That was one of the things we talked about. Bringing, interpreting readings and inviting discussion of how does this resonate for you? What's relevant for you, right? So in our group, somebody who teaches philosophy, this is like, as Jim said, like a foreign language to many of our students. As he said, the student on the left in the video, he may have had some exposure to philosophy in high school, but the student on the right, not at all likely. And so how do we role model interpreting complex readings? And then how do we help it resonate and make it news they can use in their lives? How do and that keeps the class engaging then for all of us, right? How do we help our students see the relevance of what we're trying to teach?
It's interesting because I see in the chat how Claire shared up from her group how they talked about flexibility. That word also came up in our group. Interpersonal relations came up in our group. Make it relevant. We had a really nice discussion about engaging students through becoming relevant, providing relevancy for the material. And a really nice observation from the video that we watched, somebody pointed out how sometimes you have both students in the same school. You can have both of those stories in the very same school, and we have both of those stories in this school. It doesn't have to be two physical places.
Yep.
So let's move on to part 2 because we're 5 minutes off.
Yeah, I was going to say, for time management's sake, let's continue on. So in this next section, we're going to contextualize that data that we all individually receive, but looking at it with a national lens. And then we're going to explore a little bit about the research on our own, on students' experiences. And so Amaya is going to talk to us a little bit about some of these national trends with some data.
Yes, graphs are our thing, right, in science. So here are some numbers from the National Center for Education Statistics. These are numbers from graduation in 2015, so mildly recent, depending on how you think of recent. And what they clearly show, which is what our school stats show and our individual courses show, is that underrepresented minorities, such as Black, Native, Islander, and Hispanic students, have lower graduation rates than white and Asian students at the graduate level. So if you see the graph, those groups are pointed out by the red arrows, and you can see in the dark green the graduation rate within 4 years, and especially Black students have a really low graduation rate. 21% of Black students graduate within 4 years, as opposed to Asian students that graduate, 50% of them do it at a national level at 50 years. So that is, again, we were just wanted to show you how what you're seeing in your classroom is what we're seeing nationwide. This are graphs showing the equity gaps, not just in graduation rates, but in the types of degrees underrepresented minorities obtain nationwide, which kind of makes me a little bit sick to see that if you look at the certificates, that's the Black students, 34.5% are getting certificates, and as opposed to white students, white undergraduates that are just 21%. Then we have Associate of Arts, and if we go below to the Bachelor of Arts, that's where most Bachelor of Arts, bachelor degrees are being given to white students instead of undergraduate, underrepresented minorities. So there is an equity gap in the.
Amaya, is this their highest degree? Is that what this is?
This is for first. No, so they could be. This is just those degrees, so they could go and go on. This is just people first students that entered their first year of college. Statistics. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I was just asking because our convocation speaker was talking about the benefit of certificates. So I'm just trying to understand if this is like, do some of those Hispanic and Black students with certificates also have undergraduates?
Exactly.
degrees?
Do they go on? No, that's a great point, and I don't think that these data follow that. Like what happens after the certificate? It's just saying how. When you look at the number of students who get certificates, there is a gap there. And the last slide shows, and this comes from the Center for American Progress, which is a policy center in DC, but they use the National Center for Education Statistics. And the last gap, which actually Rick graphed, because there are so many tables for us. So this is so you guys can see, we can see the trends more clearly. It is the gap in the majors that the different the distribution of in the majors that the underrepresented minorities are found. And you can see there are lots of colors here. You can see in the key it separates them from Black males and females, Hispanic males and females, and then they were all compared to the white males. And you can see how engineering, for example, is a really dramatic. Women are clearly underrepresented in the engineering field, but so are Black students, Black males. Whereas you have other careers, and they had education, and we have health professions here, which are clearly more female enriched, and minority have a higher proportion. So there's a little bit of a non-random distribution.
Is that is that nurses in the health profession?
Exactly, and that's a great point.
Most likely.
Yes.
So it's bachelor's degrees.
These are bachelors. These are
Not
doctor
MDs.
degrees. So exactly. There were a lot of information here. There were also, white males are higher proportion. They're in marketing and business. They're going to be the people that make the money, whereas we have all these service, low-paying jobs that are going to minorities and females. So clearly, we have gaps at every level in the education field. And just to show, again, because I'm a scientist, for example, in the biomedical pipeline, there are all this from the time students enroll at the beginning, and there's all these drains and all these leaks of students along the way, and that is most pronounced for underrepresented minorities. That by the time graduation comes, quite a few of them have been leaked out of the system, and in the biomedical sciences.
There's a couple of
So the
questions.
data,
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Before
I was
we
just
get
gonna
too
say-
far from the chart, there was a question from Marie Pickerel asking where are the white females in that chart? And Jonathan Velasco was asking about health professionals. Does that mean allied health careers?
Yes, so the white females are not included in this chart. There is, at the end, there is a link to where we use the data, where we used all the tables that we used to generate these graphs, and there are some tables that include white females. Something to include that on female associated degrees like education, when you compare white females with underrepresented minorities, white females were enriched, for example. So those data exist. We just had to crunch down a few of them because there was so much information. But yeah, there are data on white females as well.
So I think from earlier report, Amaya, you were mentioning that there's more similarities in interest in STEM sciences across the board, underrepresented minority students, but that these leaks show that differential outcomes, right? So it's not that there's not interest initially, it's the changes in outcome.
Exactly.
So we pose the prompt. How do these trends help us contextualize the challenges to address equity in our classrooms? And we often hear, well, how is it fair to consider these different social locations of our students with respect to their individual performances? But we ponder, how is it not fair to consider this? This is a challenge for us when we look at ideological differences, institutionalized differences, generational effects. In fact, the data I wanted to make mention, in 1933, Carter G. Woodson wrote The Miseducation of the Negro, and he talked about these vocation-oriented trends for African-American students and the kind of pushing towards the trades and not higher professional degrees. Not much has changed in almost 100 years now. And so we're really posed with the challenge of recognizing these are systemic issues, and yet individually we often just look at our students and say, why are you underperforming? You must be doing something personally wrong to be underperforming. And so we often blame the individual without looking at the greater context. So we're challenged to look at these larger trends, but asked, individually, well, what are you going to do about it? And so I think we have to consider complex answers and not just feel personally responsible for the data that we were given, that Rick pointed out to us at the beginning of our presentation. Thoughts on this, of that challenge of how do we contemplate about these data?
Take a minute to think about the great points that Karen just brought up, and then you can put them in the chat.
Karen, can I ask social locations? Can you just clarify that a little bit?
Right. So our social group membership, right? If we are male, female, if we are of whatever ethnic group that we belong to. So social location, meaning where on the landscape in our U.S. society, are we advantaged? Are we in the 1%? Are we in the top 10%? Are we below the poverty level? Right. So our social location in terms of our what we call master social statuses, our gender, our race, our ethnicity, our social economic status. Sorry, I'm not opening the chat feature. It has 26 items and that feels overwhelming to me. So hopefully others are looking at what's being said there.
Are you asking for comments, Karen, at this point, or do you just want us to put something in the chat?
Sure. Yeah. if anybody wants to pop in for a second, that would be great. You know, how do you reconcile this large level of analysis down to the micro level of an interaction that you might have with a student of color in your classroom, for example?
You know, it feels like what we're trying to do in education is to deal with a widely differing population, people all in the same construct in a cohort, right? And you know, that's seems to be a given, right? That we're going to work in a cohort. So we make that same mistake in training of, you know, I'm interested in physiology and exercise. Make that same mistake in the training of people, right? We assume that everyone is very similar. We give them all the same thing and we expect them to progress at the same rate. So it's pretty analogous, actually. You know, that's unreasonable, right? In fact, people who do training really well do so by individualizing, by recognizing the differences in each person, their rate of ability to respond to whatever stimulus you're giving them. Education is, in my mind, no different, right? To the degree that we have to work in cohorts, you know, we're limited, but we can take that same concept and then try to individualize within that cohort to the degree that's possible. Technology, of course, is a great way to facilitate this, right? To allow people to learn and progress at their own rate in a way where they can absorb information and not feel like they're being left behind because it's taking them longer or they have to use a different approach, et cetera. So I mean, that's one of the things right away. You know, it would be utopian for me to suggest we're going to get rid of cohorts. We probably aren't going to do that until we move to completely individualized online education. But you can individualize to a great degree, even in a cohort kind of structure.
Thanks, George.
Absolutely.
I like that. All right, so drilling down, I wanted to look at from a psychological point of view. I'll pull a couple of articles for us here from The Atlantic. Recently, they reported in their article, colleges have a guy problem. So we know that the U.S. education gender gap isn't just a college phenomenon. Long before that, female students outnumber men on college campuses, but we find high school graduation rates differ. We find that females tend to go straight into college more immediately than male students. Angela Duckworth, who is the author of Grit, we know looks at sex differences early on, that girls and boys have similar IQ scores, but girls get better grades. One of the arguments is that females have their brains mature a little more quickly, and that helps them with having superior self-control. We could talk about frontal lobes and you know, the ability to regulate themselves, to delay gratification, to not wander out of their seats as much, to not irritate the teacher and get in trouble, blah, 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 right? And so implicit biases perhaps also play a role in how the teacher perceives girls versus boys. Certainly minoritized students are perceived as being causing trouble more. Minoritized students are more likely to get kicked out of the classroom, things like this. And so we know that there are issues of difference from way before we come to college. We also know that the college gender gap is not just happening in the US. In countries where males and females are given more equal access to education, within a few decades, women are consistently doing better. The research suggests a complex set of variables, economic factors, cultural factors, biological factors, all create a scenario where girls and women are more firmly, as they say, more firmly attached to the educational pipeline than men. And so it's a mistake to exclusively see the female-male gender gap as a college problem. And that means that we need to consider solutions way earlier than just at our level, and not just, again, just individual faculty feeling responsible for, hey, here's your data, what's wrong with you, and why do you have equity gaps in your classrooms? That's not to say that we as individuals can, you know, that there's nothing we can do, but we have to recognize we're not alone in this challenge. I wanted to specifically look at Latino male experiences since we're a Hispanic serving institution. And this is from a dissertation from a student at San Jose, a doctoral student at San Jose State. And so one of the quotes she provides, I think, is quite illuminating. Latino male says, family plays a huge role for me as a Latino male. One of the main reasons I went to a community college was because my dad, he has horrible eyesight. Mainly I stayed there to help him out. Either it was financially or just taking them around wherever they needed to go. So aside from school, I had my home obligations. It's a responsibility because obviously they're your parents. They raised you, they taught you morals. It's my duty to them. And so he's exemplifying his commitment to family. And I think all of us at this school can really recognize that in our students, right? And that's not just Latino male students, that's certainly female students as well. Higher education, it often will demand that we ask them to restrict those roles and responsibilities, and we have to be much more accommodating, understanding of that, right? So we've heard our students say, I'm responsible for my siblings. If I'm the only one in the family that has a functioning car, I have to manage not just for myself but for everyone else. And so recognizing these many roles and responsibilities our students have helps us understand their academic challenges and appreciate their successes and the resiliency that they demonstrate. Just coming up to college is a accomplishment, and we need to recognize that and let them know we see that is a success for them already. So I think we need to ask the question, what can we do to better know our students, to see them as whole people and not just as learners, to recognize that they're wearing multiple hats, right? Continuing on from this research, the feeling of being alone and like an outsider is a common experience for Latino students. There's a sense of communalism within the family and yet not that sense at school. And so a lot of Latino college students won't seek help when they're struggling in their classes. They don't want to be seen as exemplifying, oh, you're typical for your group, right? For your ethnic group, that there's an expectation that you're going to underperform. Ooh, can somebody mute? I'm not sure who's so exemplifying stereotype threat, that idea that you're going to reinforce the idea that you're less than, makes a lot of students of color fear or be apprehensive about reaching out for help. They don't want to be seen as reinforcing the stereotype that they're academically incompetent. And so feeling lonely, feeling scared, and at times uncomfortable when entering a classroom as a racialized or gendered other, all of these factors produce a psychological stress in our minoritized and male students. And on top of that, there are additional microaggressions, and I have to say, I have to work harder for recognizing this. And I do a lot of small group interactions and thinking about the stress that provides for students who feel like, oh, my peers are going to judge me as less than. And so I'm going to be even more quiet in the group, and that can reinforce assumptions about, see, they're going to be a burden. And students are often challenged in group work. So I want us to be especially mindful about this. And so this article talks about racial battle fatigue and the challenge of internally feeling a lot of stress to perform, to rise up and overcome stereotypes of racial profiling. And microaggressions can be simply rolling your eyes when being put in a group with someone other and being seen as less than, right? Maybe comments being made about, well, I'll do more of the work, or I'm gonna pretend I didn't hear your input because I don't know that I trust it or value it as much. Those kinds of comments were very frequent by the students that were interviewed in this research. And so minoritized students endure psychological stress symptoms of anxiety, frustration, anger, feeling nervous, but keeping that to themselves, not speaking out because they don't want to be perceived as you know, a troublemaker or being seen as inferior in any way. So they report feeling tired by always being mindful about how they're being perceived, and that working to change others' perceptions towards them. And this is known as hypervigilance, right? I'm constantly on guard of how am I being viewed? How am I being perceived by others? So this feeling of being perceived as an outsider is not being seen as legit. If you look around on our campus, we're a Hispanic serving campus, but if you look at if you look at who represents the people that are taking out the trash, that are cleaning the buildings, that are serving us food, and then who are our faculty and who are our administrators, where do our Hispanic students see representation? Do they see the faculty reflecting who they are? Do they see the people who are serving them food and cleaning up the buildings? And so a lot of minoritized students will talk about, am I being seen as a legitimate student here, right? And so this in this report, many report feeling as outsiders, feeling anxious to be seen as, am I a legit student? Do I belong here? Even at a Hispanic serving institution such as ours. And so instead of making assumptions about students' disengagement, if they're quiet, if they're reserved, if they're being standoffish, if they're hesitant to engage, we can't assume that that means that they truly don't care about their education at all. It could be that they're doing a lot of monitoring internally about how am I being perceived, and I don't want to say anything that's going to make me look stupid, or that's going to make my race look stupid, right? And so we need to go the extra mile to figure out, how do we help our students feel they belong? How do we help them know that we believe in them? We really need to ramp up our game to make sure our students feel included, and that we do have high expectations of them, that we aren't lowering the bar because we think they're not as capable. All right, that we have to invest in them fully. How do we demonstrate that we believe in their ability to excel? That's the question I want to leave you with. And so to kind of wrap up, to kind of summarize, we have a lot of examples of barriers. Coming in with a GPA that may be a little bit less than, coming in with a lower income, and we know that is related with standardized tests, right? And that helps put us into placement of for math and for language classes and things like that. Having a sense of loneliness, a lack of social belonging, questioning, do I fit in here? Am I seen as an academic outsider? Not feeling as comfortable talking to faculty, being obedient, that sense of this is the authority and I can't approach an authority person, right? Not a sense of it's okay for me to interact with a faculty member, to reach out to them. Excuse me. Having a lack of awareness and understanding of college practices. I remember a student asking me, what's a provost? And honestly, as a first gen student myself, I'm like, not exactly sure. I think that's the vice president. What is that? Right. And so will I get in trouble and go to the principal's office, if I get a bad grade in class? Some students have no understanding of what it means to be in college, and that can feel really isolating, and not even know what kinds of questions to ask them.
Okay.
So yeah, do you want to jump in, Rick?
Well, it's 11, so
thank you.
Keeping on time.
Okay, so do we want to talk about this, or do we want to skip to the next section for time management's sake?
Oh, I think we could do this.
Because I think it's
yeah.
Okay. So I wanted to share a quick anecdote and apply what we've just covered. So at the start of this last semester, one of our student advisor said, one of our advisors for students said, I took a student over to a classroom and the instructor, the door was closed. They were a few minutes late and the student tried to go into the classroom. They had difficulties with getting registered, systems were down, blah, 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 classic, issues. And the instructor would not let them in. And a student went to open the door for the other student. They're like, nope, don't do that. And so no entrance once classes started. That was the policy. So I want us to take a couple of minutes and reflect upon these questions about what potential reasons might that student have had for being late to class, right? How might this relate to equity gaps that we just addressed? What reasons might the instructor have had for refusing entrance? And how might that be based on their own experiences in school? It's kind of old school mindset. And how do student-centered class policies help us promote equity in learning opportunities? And then we'll go in breakout rooms one more time to have some reflection on what we talked about.
Hey, Denise, let's do that for instead of 5. Let's do 5 instead of 10. And yeah, and whenever you want to do that, Denise, go for it.
Okay, you'll go back into the same rooms. There'll be some folks have left this session, so I'll do my best to balance out really quick. There'll be between 3 and 4 people in each room. And I have it set for 5 minutes. Here we go. Get y'all in a room real quick. Cabin. And then Miss Marie, let's get you into. Thanks for your patience. This is not my favorite thing to do. It's good to see you. Here you go.
Hi, Denise. I was in a room and then somehow got kicked out. I don't know what happened. I was in room 9 with Aaron and Kevin. Could you throw me back in?
I can't because it says not joined. Do you see an option on your screen to join the room? Let me do this. Let me just try to reassign you to that same. It won't let me reassign you to that same room.
I saw Kevin's face.
I can put you in another room, but I can't put you. I don't have the option to put you in the same one. It just says not
That's
joined.
fine.
Okay, let me get
That's
you.
fine. Sorry about
over
that.
here.
I don't know what happened.
No worries. Here you go. Katie, did you end up making it to a room?
Yeah, I got a few minutes in another room. That was so weird. I could see Kevin.
That was strange. It said that I had assigned you to that room, but you had not joined yet. So it wouldn't let me put you back into that room, but I could put you into any
Oh,
other
weird.
one. Yeah, it was very strange. That's the
Well,
first time I've
thanks. I
seen
got a
that
few
one.
minutes.
Great, great.
Okay, so I hope you guys had great discussions. This was a little bit shorter time. My group had really nice discussions. I think we all have experiences with students coming late, or that particular example, and how we, it's nice to how we address that, and how do we blame the individual, or how do we deal with them. And we talked about how we just treat students like adults. It's they're adults, and they know when class begins, and there's no need to be putting judgment on that. It's on their court. So I don't know if anybody wants to quickly share anything from their discussion. Otherwise, we'll move to the next section.
Let's give them some solutions. What do we got?
All right. So it seems like we've been talking about the problems all along, and we wanted to make sure that we provided you some solutions that, or give you a little bit of a blue sky. There's definitely ways to address some of the issues we've talked about. So that's what we're going to do right off. And Karen has a quick slide before I give you some examples of how I address some of these in my classroom.
So recently I did a training and I recommend this book, Teach Students How to Learn, Strategies You Can Incorporate into Any Course to Improve Student Metacognition, Study Skills and Motivation by Sandra McGuire. And so I was telling my students some of the techniques, and one of my students got 100% on her final, and she was so excited. She's like, thank you so much for sharing strategies. I'm like, well, which ones specifically? Because she was really struggling with this class, and she just was resistant, and she just kept ruminating about how she was not doing well. And I'm like, you need to let that go and keep focusing on what you can change, what you can improve upon. And so one of the things, there are 3 points that she said really were helpful. One was looking for points to teach from the reading. So asking our students, when you're reviewing a reading, look for the things that if you were to be teaching about this, what would you think are really key points to share? And then concept map, making a concept map where you look for relationships among the key points from the reading, right? And that's the demonstration there in the image. And then it's so important is making it relevant, connecting the information to other topics. She says, when I connected it to other information that I did care about, because this was not a course she really found, she's like, oh, I don't know why I'm ever going to need this course. And I'm like, you keep saying that, and that makes you keep being disengaged from the material. And so I want you to think about ways you can connect it to what you really do care about and how it is relevant. And that helped her get over that frustration of and disengagement.
So thank you, Karen. We have here examples of really specific examples that help students be engaged. Relevancy has come up in our discussion groups, and again, it's one of my favorites. But the one I wanted to talk to you about, that where there's clear evidence that reduces achievement gap of underrepresented minorities, at least in STEM, it is active learning in the classroom. And there's a great paper that discusses a lot of points, but what they found, the data clearly shows, that classroom students in classrooms and in courses where there is intense active learning activities, the gap is reduced. The passing rate and the number they came up with is a 45% decrease in passing and the gap in passing the course. They proposed, they speculated why that might be, and some of the speculations was that for students that came from that one experience that we saw in the video earlier, that's the experience of the Black student, when they come into a classroom where they are active learners, that might be the first time that they've achieved that high, that they've experienced that kind of education. So they're going to absorb it, soak it, and it's really going to benefit them greatly, because active learning benefits all students, but what the data show is that it benefits more this underrepresented minority. They really get more out of it. Another reason, I'm not quite finished with that slide. And another reason is that when you are an active learner, you are actually now suddenly you're a scientist, right? In STEM course, you're actively thinking, you're actively reasoning, so you might identify more as a scientist, and you might be able to, and you then perform better. So they propose that a good combination of inclusive teaching, of soft skills of instructor, paired with these active learning practices, it seems to be a really nice combination that you can apply to your courses to reduce that gap. And I just wanted to do a little bit of a nuance before we move to the next slide. That active learning, they saw through the data that throwing iClicker questions into a course, that's not enough. That is called not intense, low intensity active learning. Yes, it keeps them awake, and I use iClicker questions, but we're talking here about very deliberate active learning, flip courses and ways where the students are driving the learning. So I just wanted to make that point, because sometimes I think we think, hey, they're clicking something, which is really valuable as well. But in order to get that reduced achievement gap, what they found in their studies was that you had to do intense active learning. And the next slide just shows another study. Again, I'd love to read data, papers and data about this, but it just shows the same. The active learning reduces the gap in STEM and structure in the course. A little nugget from this paper before I show you what I do and how I apply it. A little nugget that I got out of this paper, an insight, was that most students will come, regardless of their background, having been tested in Bloom's levels 1 and 2. Yet we expect them to answer, to my assessment is like short answers where they're having to reason. So underrepresented minorities that have not had that experience, that practice, they have not gone to schools where they are have not been able to develop those skills, then are not going to be able to do my assessments despite their interest. So when you do active learning and you introduce practices where you bring them along and suddenly they get to practice before the assessment, the Bloom level 3 and whatnot and 4 that you are expected them to do, that's helping reduce the gap because they'll know how to spit out some details, but they just haven't had the practice. So how do I do this in my courses? From the very first day, I set the tone that they're going to be not listening in class, just passive. They're going to be actively. So what you see here is what I do that very first day of class, which is that I give them this handout, or when we were online, we had Google Docs, and they work in pairs or in groups of 3, depending on the size of the classroom, and they have the syllabus in front of them and they explore it. So I have all these little questions, and they spend 10-15 minutes going through the syllabus on their own, talking to their peers, trying to figure out how many exams, and they have to flip and look at the exams, and how do they get extra credit, and where are the quizzes, and where are the tutor for this class. So they all do that. I like to do this because then I know that, because we've done it in class, I know everybody is going to get this information. There are typos, everybody gets hung up at the same time, and I don't, we are like, okay, yes, this is what I meant, and we corrected. I wanted to show, also let you know my path to make it to this point. When I first came, I would give them the syllabus and go through it with slides. Then I realized that some of the information wasn't getting through, like, oh, I didn't realize this was due. I didn't know where to find this. So I started putting iClicker questions, like, oh, how many exams are in the class? And they had to choose a number, and then I realized that that was still not enough. Again, and I still use slides after we do this and do a couple iClickers, but really this intense, they are the drivers looking through the material, is what really makes a difference. And it's fun. And it's nice too that we all talk about the syllabus together and instead of me doing it. I have more examples for every concept. This is from my micro class. This is a really simple concept, but I still do it. Before I talked about the fields of microbiology, and I have slides about what a clinical microbiologist does or an agricultural microbiologist. Again, they go into the same groups that they kind of pair up, and they try to, before we even look at them on the slides, they have to think about it, talk about these fields, match them up, and do the work on their own. And this is clearly not a very sophisticated concept, but I do it for everything. And then, oh, I don't know what happened to my slide there. Yeah, because this is my favorite. This is, oh, no. Wait, let's see. There you go. And this is the last just kind of tip one of my favorite that I want to share, which is one of my favorite things to do, which is how I present figures to the students anymore. This is what comes from the textbook and what I used to show. What you're seeing here is protein sorting. Proteins are made and they have to go to different parts of the cell. And you can see in A, B, and C, there are 3 different proteins made and they're going to 3 different parts of the cell. If we go to the next slide, this is how I cover the material now. First, I get them to think, here we've talked about, how to make proteins. The little yellow things are protein factories. And we talk about what's the same on these scenarios, what is different. And you can just, I'm sure even if you're not a biologist, you can probably see that they're different colors, right? So right away they pick up on that, on the location. And what's the same, we're having the little protein factories. And if we go to the next slide, then we do, well, what else is different now? They're different, well, they're going to different places. And by the time I show them the last slide, the complete thing, they've already figured out. And then I'll have an iClicker question or something to a different assessment. And this was just because I get really excited about how we break down everything figure. So even an animation, I break it down. I take snapshots, and before I show the animation, I make the students try to identify what it is. They don't have to be experts, but I find that if I just show an animation, here is mRNA, and this is what's going on. I'm really excited because I know exactly what those are, but I realized that they weren't understanding. They didn't know that was the nucleus in the back or whatnot. So let's have a little bit of a pause and give them a chance to see them. And then when they see the animation, they actually understand. So this is how I've evolved my courses. I still use iClickers a lot, of course, but I'm doing a lot of active learning, incorporating this student-led learning the concepts on their own before we talk about them together. So this is something you can do in the courses. On the next slide, and I'm gonna hand out this off to Rick really quick, is what can we do as an institution? And this is a really interesting paper that just came out about targeted interventions. And this paper deals with general chemistry, which is this course that you need for most STEM careers and majors. And if you pass general chemistry, you're on your way. In fact, they found that there's this hyper persistent underrepresented students that are able to get a C in general chemistry become even more motivated to succeed, as opposed to getting a C- or below, which is appears to be a way, a signal of a dropout, somebody who's just not even going to graduate. So here we have a course that affects a lot of majors, and that is a bottleneck for underrepresented students. So that could be a targeted institutional intervention, not. And Rick, of course, as a chemist, has experience with this, so I want to hand it up to him.
All right, thanks, Maya. Just if we click to the next slide, just want to show what we've been doing in STEM, just to give you ideas. Not obviously a lot of this you're not gonna be able to do because there's a lot of funding involved in this, but give you ideas. So through Title III programs and Department of Education, the STEM area has now gotten 3 of these grants in successive terms. So they're 5-year grants, but just to give you an idea of how we've been trying to build things in STEM. So the first grant was called Propel, Providing Opportunities to Excel. And this is where we started building kind of the foundation, what we needed to do institutionally and changes we needed to make in courses. So that grant allowed us to start the Science Learning Center, which has now been institutionalized and is running on student funds. But we also have institutionalized peer tutoring. That grant allowed us to do a bunch of course redesign so we could start doing some of the active learning. We redesigned labs and allowed us to purchase instrumentation and equipment so students could get in the lab and do research with faculty. The second one, once we got that in place, we built research communities, meaning that we hired postdocs to run research communities. So we'd have, the idea was to get students of all backgrounds on campus between 9 and 5. Instead of coming to class, going home, coming back, going home, we wanted them on campus in this community, this academic community. And we built these communities based on research projects. So the students starting their sophomore year would get in these communities and do research. This, we got over a 90% retention rate of these students and over a 90% graduation rate of these students. So just building these communities had a huge effect on our success and their success. This kind of was the birth of Discovery Scholars, which is now institutionalized to try to get students even at the freshman level. It allowed course redesign and some community activities. We just got a third set of funding, which is now going to even go farther than that, which is called MAPS. And honestly, I have not fully read that one. That was done by Dr. Van den Heuvel before he left. So that's kind of how we're working here. And like Amaya said, Gen Chem is a big issue. Students that come into Gen Chem and do not pass Gen Chem their first time they take it, over 95, I want to say 95% of them don't graduate from college. So we are taking active steps to fix that. All right, I'm done.
Okay, so we are to our last reflection and breakout time. We are we are almost out of time. In fact, we are in 1 minute out of the time that we promised you. So we totally respect if you have to go and do other activities, but we're still, for those of you who have just another 10 minutes to discuss with your peers, how, based on today's discussion, what kind of deliberate implementation could you do to your course? That's something that you could discuss. And what do you think the institution could do as well? So we provided examples of how I do it. We provided an example of the institution change for this one course. What's happening in your major that would be a targeted institutional intervention? And also, we would love to know what kind of key take-home points you've had from your time here today in reducing that gap and understanding our students. So Denise, if you can do that, and then and let's just do it again, yeah, for 5 minutes like before, to be respectful of people's time.
And for those that you need to leave, there's another session starting at 1 this afternoon, run by the other fellows, so you don't have to listen to us talk anymore.
Exactly.
But please attend that, because that's going to explore more opportunities to make changes.
Oh, 5 minutes fell too short in our group. What a great discussions that we're starting about our courses. Does anybody want to share something before we go to prepare those syllabi and and make them make them fair to all of our students?
So I think the one thing that we discussed was COVID and how the students coming through, we're going to have a whole bunch of different issues that we're going to have to be really flexible with and figure out solutions to. Just talking, my wife's a high school teacher. I know a number of middle school teachers and just the issues they're having that I think are just going to be exacerbated before we see that.
Yes, so the flexibility we spoke of earlier. Anybody has an active learning exercise that they're very excited about that they do and want to share?
Diffusion of responsibility. Way too many people.
Oh, way too many people. Well, I could talk about that forever. It's just so much fun to see the students, when they have to figure out the things on their own. It's just a lot more fun. It's not for us to go there and have fun, which we do, right? Oh my gosh, this is so great. Look where the proteins are going. Isn't it fun? Let them play, let them figure out on their own and identify as somebody who is able to think and come up with those great ideas. So I think Denise is going to close it off, but thank you so much for your attention during this session. I was very nervous. I think Karen and Rick are a lot more chill. It's our first time doing this, our first Convocation workshop, and we've had a great time, and we're very honored that you came and you stayed here and you had those great discussions. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for attending. We do have a session at 1 p.m. today. This session and the chat transcript will be posted on the CTO website by Monday for you to access. Hope to see y'all this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's very useful
Bye-bye.
information.
Awesome. Thank you.
That was a great session.
Thank you, George.
Thank you.
Woo! High five, fellows.
You guys did a great
That
job.
was awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Whew, it's over.
You can breathe, Amaya. Well done, everybody.
We were like,